Now, there are certain subjects that are absolutely perfect for this show, so I'd like to thank Alan Shearer right at the top for giving us this one, because it's already generated a huge amount of debate here at Sky and also on social media. Alan Shearer has said, in his opinion, that Sergio Aguero is the greatest ever foreign player ever to play in the Premier League. A striker without a weakness. Gentlemen, first of all, what would you say about Aguero's claims?
He's got very good claims, make no mistake about that. I think he's been here a length of time now where you would think, yeah, you've had a real impact. He's had a consistent impact for a number of years. I still think he's short of being the top player, personally.
I agree. I agree. Well, if you look at it as well, you know, my biggest concern with Aguero being in that bracket, I definitely believe he's an outstanding player and he's been incredible for the Premier League, but his injuries have impacted his seasons. You know, he hasn't won PFA Player of the Year, and you look at the players before him. I look at Henry. I think he won 2 or 3 of them. Bergkamp. You know, these players were able. Ronaldo were able to win PFA Player of the Years. He's just always during the season just picked up the wrong injury at the wrong time to have that season. But then if you look at his goal ratio, his goal record has been really impressive. I'm a huge fan of Aguero, but you know, I believe there's still there's a few players that are ahead of him for that.
Well, I mean, Alan Shearer knows a little bit about scoring goals, doesn't he?
Does.
Of course, the all-time leading goal scorer in the Premier League, so it is an opinion to be respected. And when you look at the Aguero statistics, they are quite incredible, and his goal ratio and how, as you said, he continually comes up with the goods. So he does have a very strong claim.
No, of course he does. But at the same time, like, I look back and I believe Schmeichel's the best goalkeeper I've ever seen in the Premier League. I don't believe we've seen anyone like him. He changed the game from what Manchester United were going on to for their success. Without him, I don't believe a lot of that would have been possible.
Craig, just stay with Aguero, though. You look at those stats there.
What do you know? His stats are incredible. He's an incredible player. I'm not debating that. I'm a huge fan of his. I love him as a footballer. But like I said, which we'll get onto now shortly, because you just interrupted me to stop me from going into it. There are other players out there who have had an even bigger impact, and even though how impressive that is, I've seen 1 or 2 foreign players that have come here that have changed the game for us.
I've got to turn around and say as well, Aguero's played in an era at Manchester City where Manchester City, bar one other team maybe, have dominated the division. I think that he thrives on people supplying him to finish, more so than an Henry that created as well as finishing, you know. And everyone's going to look at a fella who puts the ball in the back of the net, you know. Craig touched on Schmeichel, or a midfield player like Vieira, well, that doesn't score goals but has as much impact potentially.
Could you argue, though, for Aguero, you say he has played an era of dominance for Manchester City, but the game has got faster and faster. So is it tougher for him now than it was those players previously? I
personally believe defending was a lot better earlier than what it is now. The defenders were defenders. Because, you know, you look at Arsenal's back four with the likes of Tony Adams, Bold, Dixon, you know, and what Manchester United had, even, you know, with Yapstam, Pallister. They were real top-end defenders.
As he says those names, he's wincing.
He did wince.
Because I remember the pain. Tony Adams is the best defender I've ever played against. I was so relieved when he retired. And honestly, even Pallister was my first ever game in the Premier League. Actually made an assist by just taking it off me, nicking it in front of me, run through the middle of the park, slip boxage in for a goal, and that was my debut, and just welcome to the Premier League against a top player.
Right. Stay with the subject. First of all, do you think then...
Let's stop going off it then.
For the greatest foreign player ever to play in the Premier League, realistically, have they got to be a goal scorer?
Realistically, I don't think they do, but whoever we decide on and the people outside decide on, it will be a goal scorer. Yeah,
look, I'm Vieira. Like, one player that always comes to my mind is Dennis Bergkamp. It was just the time he came into Arsenal, from Inter Milan at the time. Look, everyone was aware of Bergkamp and how talented he was. He didn't have a great time at And I was actually at that game. I was injured, the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. I remember then him coming from Inter Milan with this great reputation. It didn't quite work out with Inter Milan, but he was, for me, the first real star. He was, you know, we had a little touch of Klinsmann with Spurs as well just before then. But we've had, like, obviously, look, there's been foreign players down the years, but the professionalism he brought into Arsenal, but also brought into the Premier League. I remember even as a young kid listening to, you know, he didn't drink. There were certain habits he had. He was so professional in everything he'd done, and his talent, and also playing the role he did, opened a lot of teams up as well. A lot of teams then, you know, needed a player like Dennis Bergkamp, which there wasn't many about. I thought his professionalism made it fashionable to go and get these type of foreign players. Now these players are out there. Let's bring them into the Premier League. And a lot of Arsenal's success, and even Thierry Henry, I believe, is the best foreign import I've seen play in the Premier League, because he went through a 3-4 year period where it was the best kid in the playground by a long way. His assists, his goals, he was untouchable. He went through a period that I've not seen from another Premier League footballer. And I believe that's why, going back into Bergkamp as well, he helped him. If Bergkamp wouldn't have been at Arsenal at that time, when Thierry Henry went there from a tough time at Juventus, being a young player, gave him that, you know, he had that role model there, that incredible footballer, that level of training, that dedication he was able to see off Bergkamp, helped this player become the best player in the Premier League that I've seen.
So how would you split Bergkamp and Henry in terms of their claims to be the greatest ever import?
I would put it exactly like this. I'd put myself in a back four facing both players. Which one wouldn't I want to face? The fella who can run past me and 8 of my teammates can put it in the goal. I'd rather face the trickery and the cleverness and the acuteness of Bergkamp and his footballing brain, rather than Henry, who's got the traits to unpick me and my defence with clever play, with sheer power, sheer pace. I was a 40-year-old about to go into the Premier League with Manchester City, and the one thing that made me retire was the fact that I had to face someone like Henry that could embarrass you. He could embarrass the best in the world, let alone you know, someone at the end of their career. For me, who don't you want to face? He was the one that I thought, don't want to face this fella.
He was doing what he wanted. That's what it looked like. Even when you were playing against him, he's taking a mick. He was also, you just couldn't get, he could ride challenges, then he could put the accelerator on and leave quick players for dead. You know, I just gone off the top of my head, like Ronaldo had a spell which was incredible, but he wasn't there long enough. You know, Ronaldo, if he would have stayed in the Premier League, we'll be talking about Ronaldo, definitely. But yeah, Henry was just incredible. It was a period, even playing against him was like, it's so, it was just, you'd end up watching him. It was that good, and it was, you know, even players around him, you couldn't mark him, you couldn't stop him, and that's something I didn't play against too often.
Before we come to a final decision on this particular show, let's just have a look at the claims of a couple of others, and one player who actually celebrates being 10 years in the Premier League today.
10 years at City, in the transitions we've had, is like 30 years in another club, trust me. So it's cemented. There's nothing we can do about it. We're tied to each other for life, but it's a good thing. And my family's from Manchester. My kids are Mancunians. You know, we're here for the long term, and as fans, as whatever capacity, will always be there.
I mean, he makes a very good point there. He's been at Manchester City throughout that period, and he's been a pivotal figure, a central rock. I mean, I think he was in Gary Neville's Team of the Year last season, despite him not playing anywhere near as many games as he would have liked to. Does he have it? Is he certainly worthy of a mention, Vincent Kompany? Yeah,
it'd be worthy of a mention. Injuries again. I don't believe, you know, we've seen brilliant performances from him, but just those injuries have just stagnated, has slowed it down for what he's really got. Being an outstanding footballer. I remember him when he first signed for Manchester City. I came in about 4 months after him. So he came in not with Abu Dhabi, it was Sinuatra, I believe, at the time. Yeah. So he came in under him. Mark Hughes signed him, and he was a defensive midfielder. Like when they bought him from Hamburg, he was a sitting midfielder as well. He was playing there at the time. And like I struck a really good relationship with him straight away because I seen a player he just wanted to improve, wanted to get better, was willing to ask questions, he had such drive about him. And when I got there as well, it was like me, Nigel de Jong, wanted to bring intensity up in training, and the likes of like Robinho, Elano were completely the opposite. And I remember they weren't speaking to Vinny because he had a go at him one game after the game. He had a go. He went into the change rooms, told him a few untruths, and they literally weren't speaking to him for a couple of months. So when I went in after a couple of weeks, then I ranted after the game, and I remember Vinny going, "I'm so relieved I've got someone else now with me because they've tried ostracising me. I'm the bad one. Well, now I've got you with me." And I said, "Listen, welcome to my world." This will be quite common.
Now, I'm sure there'll be many suggestions, but let's go old school. Maybe not as long, but in terms of impact at a club, surely we can't sit here without mentioning Eric Cantona. And the impact he had. They hadn't won the title for 26 years. His arrival, of course, he didn't do it all himself, but what he brought.
I think if you asked anyone at Manchester, we've spoke about Schmeichel at Manchester, they would probably all put Cantona in front of Schmeichel, I think. He's held with such esteem in Manchester. I would throw it back to the old mantra, which one would I rather play against? I'd rather play against Cantona all the time. I don't think Cantona had a massive international impact. That's what I would say. I played against him.
No, it's Premier League only, mate.
Yeah, well, OK, but yeah, fine. For me, I wouldn't, but I know a lot of people will. Certainly a lot of Manchester United fans. And the fact, I think he changed the culture and the belief at that football club when he walked through the door. He had that arrogance about him.
That's why I'm putting him forwards.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Cantona has a great shot. He's just immense footballer. Just his stature, everything about him. He was, to watch him and what he was like a. I don't want to use the word pop. Well, I will use the word pop star. He was just. There was something different about this man. As soon as he walked, you just wanted to even see him in a tunnel.
Yeah. Presence, charisma.
That's
aura.
Exactly the word. Yeah.
Potentially aura.
Yeah, he was so impressive, and you're right. He did change the culture of Manchester United, and a lot of the success they went on to have in a number of years with the young players.
You're starting to rethink your vote, aren't you?
No, I'll stick with him. But you're right. The likes of Cantona would just.
OK, before we get your final votes, we did put out a poll this afternoon. 41,000 people voted, and this is the verdicts that we had. So, Bergkamp did get 9% of the votes, and then we've got Aguero with 12%. Ronaldo. Now, did we actually even? You mentioned. You said he didn't play here long enough, did you?
Yeah.
I would be of the same opinion. I don't think he was here. If he had stayed the course here...
He was here for a number of years, but it was just... He was young, he was 17 when he first came, so his peak, at the height of his powers, had been at Madrid. So if he would have stayed here for his peak and, had that... well, he's still on his peak now, the guy just keeps going, then he would have had it.
Before the final word, I just want to go back to Sergio Aguero and his goal-scoring ratio, because it looks like in the final two, it's between Bergkamp and Henry, by the sound of things, or maybe Cantona. But Aguero could well overtake Henry's goal-scoring record with less games.
Yeah.
So would that change your mind?
No. Thierry Henry was more than just goals. He was more than goals. He was everywhere. He was everywhere. Like I said, he had a period where he'd pop up on the left wing. The amount of assists he'd make, he was just always a constant threat. He could pick the ball up from the centre of the park and then just go through 4 or 5 players. Like I said, he went through a period where he was just unstoppable.
OK then, final word. Who's your vote?
Thierry Henry for me.
Thierry Henry.